Welcome back to Broken Linux, episode 9, and today we've got a genuinely weird one. Look at this. Index.html is chmod 777, owned by root. World readable, world readable, world executable. And yet, when we try to read it as the Nginx user, the system slams the door in our face. Permission denied. On a file where everyone, in theory, has permission to do everything. Something deeper is going on here. So here's the setup. We're on Edge01, a static site served out of var html by Nginx. Release 41 deployed cleanly. Release 42, same pipeline, same shell script that pulls a tarball, extracts it in the deploy user's home, and moves it into place. Suddenly serves 4 host 3s. And yes, someone already reached for chmod 777. That's why the file looks the way it does. It changed nothing. And we'll pull those bits back off before we're done. But it's a useful clue. Whatever's blocking Nginx isn't living in the classic permission bits at all. So let's actually pause and think about what we know. The file is mode 777. Nginx runs as the Nginx user, which is very much part of world. Every directory above it is root-owned, but world executable, so the traversal path is clean. And the same content from the same pipeline returned 200 yesterday. Under the discretionary permission model you were taught, none of this adds up to a denial. Something else is on that request path, something the mode bits don't show you. So we walk through the usual suspects, and each one collapses on contact. Ownership. At mode 777, it simply doesn't matter. That Nginx and LSL tell us nothing useful. The path above, Namael, walks every component from index.html up to /, and every directory carries the execute bit. That's the one people forget, by the way. Opening a file requires execute on every ancestor, and ACLs or file attributes. GetFile shows no extended entries. LZADR shows no immutable bit. 3 clean hypotheses, 3 dead ends. And here's the thing. The answer has been sitting on screen the entire time. Look at the permission string. r.wxr x followed by a dot. That trailing dot is not decoration. It means the file carries an SE Linux security context. Add z to ls and the truth spills out. Our index.html is labeled user home t, while a matchpath con tells us anything under var abudw should be httpd sys content ati. The file is wearing the wrong uniform. So how did a file in var whtml end up mislabeled? One word, mv. When you move a file, its context travels with it. The original label is preserved, which is atomic and fast, and exactly why deploy scripts reach for it. CP, by contrast, creates a new file that inherits the destination's default context. Stage your content in a home directory, or TMP, then MV it into place, and you've just imported user.home tussie into your web root. The fix is a single line at the end of every deploy. Restore con, are idempotent, and correct no matter how the files got there. So we have 3 commands that all appear to work. Restore con is the real fix. It reads the policy and relabels the tree to match. And once the label is right, you can finally drop that 777 back to something sane. Chcon looks identical in the moment, but it writes the label without touching the policy. So the next full relabel silently undoes your work. And setenforce 0, disabling the very thing catching the bug, speaks for itself. One caveat, if your doc root lives somewhere non-standard like srv web, restorecon has nothing to go on. You have to teach the policy first with symonage fcontext, then relabel. And if that pattern feels familiar, it should. 2 weeks ago, in episode 7, we taught the policy about a port, symonage port, http bas port chai, TCP 3000, effective immediately. This week, it's the same shape, just for a path. Symonage fcontext to declare the label, then restorecon to make the file system catch up. None of this ceremony exists on Ubuntu, by the way. Apermore confines Nginx by binary path, not by file label, so the identical deploy script just works there, which is one more reason it worked on staging means nothing when staging is a different distribution. Before we close out, a quick teaser for next week. Episode 10, a process gets killed on a box with 16 gigs of memory sitting free. No pressure, no obvious culprit, just a dead process and a very confused admin. If that sounds like your kind of mystery, subscribe over at youtube.com/@Dargslan, and I'll see you in the next one.